This is the lesson for 3-3, day 2, writing equations from pictures. Now, if you think back to the past couple days, this is the generic form for the equation of a line, y equals mx plus b. Remember that your m stands for the slope of the line. Remember, slope is how many you go up or down. Up if it is positive, down if it is negative. And then the bottom number in your fraction, because slope is always written as a fraction, is how many you go over to the right. You never, ever, ever go over to the left. The top number is how many you go up or down. The bottom number in your fraction is how many you go over to the right. So if we take a look at like this equation, this would be up 1 over 2. This would be down 2 over 3. Your plus b is your y-intercept. It's the place where the line crosses the y-axis. So when we have a picture of a graph, it is the place where the line crosses the y-axis. So this is our y-axis here in green. It's the place where the line crosses the y-axis. This point is always written 0, comma, whatever this number is. All right, so maybe this was 3. So then it would be 0, comma 3. All right. These are examples of what your equations need to look like today. So notice that all of them start with y equals. Then you have a number and your x. Then you have a plus or minus. That's what your equations need to look like. Now, on ones like this, y equals 1/2 x, remember that that would be an acceptable answer, but we could also put a plus 0 there, and that wouldn't change the problem at all. Both of those would be acceptable answers because they mean the same exact thing. Also, if you have one like this where you just have a letter with no number in front of it, negative x is fine, but also an answer like negative 1x would be fine. Also, an answer like negative 1 over 1x would be fine. In these, you could also put 2 over 1. You could put negative 3 over 1, 3 over 1. Those can be written as a fraction all the time, or if it's over 1, you technically don't need to put the over 1. All right. So there's lots of different answers for some of these questions, and they all mean the same thing. So let's take a look at what you have to do today. What you're going to be given is you're going to be given a picture of the graph. You're not graphing anything today. You're being given the picture. You need to come up with the equation, the slope, and the y-intercept. So you're sort of working backwards from yesterday. Yesterday, you were given the equation and you had to graph the line. Today, you're being given the line and you need to come up with the equation. Remember that your equations need to look like this. All right. So I think the easiest way to do this is to find the slope first, find your y-intercept, and then write the equation. I know that in your answer blanks, the equation's at the top, but I would find the slope and the y-intercept first and then work on the equation. So I actually think we're finding the y-intercept first is the easiest thing. The y-intercept is where the line crosses the y-axis. There's our y-axis in green. The line crosses the y-axis right here. So the first thing that I would fill in is 0, comma 3 for your y-intercept. Now you want to go from left to right, just like you read a sentence. So how do you get from this first point to the second point to the third point? Well, what we're doing, remember, in our slope is how many we go up or down, and then how many we go over to the right. So I'm going to draw my fraction bar. How many do I go up, and then how many do I go over? So I'm going up 1 over 2, up 1 over 2. So our slope would be 1 over 2. You always have to go from the left to the right, just like you read a sentence. So up 1 over 2. Now you have to write your equation. Now remember, for our equation, if you take a look at this blue box up here, our equation is y equals, we already have that, we need to put our slope in front of the x. So this 1/2 has to go in front of the x. And then you have a plus b. Now the b value is this number in your y-intercept, all right? If it's positive, you're going to write plus. If it's negative, you're going to write minus. So this is 0 comma positive 3. So we're going to write plus 3. And that is our final answer of our equation. Let's take a look at the next one. So all of these are done the same exact way until we get to the special examples later on. So again, the first thing that I would find is your y-intercept. All right, there's our y-intercept. There's our y-axis. Our y-intercept is where the line crosses the y-axis. This one crosses at 0, 0. Now, how do you get from point to point to point? Going from the left to the right, just like you read a sentence. Now, on this one, be careful. We're going down 1 over 3. Down 1 over 3. Since we're going down 1 over 3, our slope would be negative 1/3. That's the number in our equation that goes in front of your x. And then we have to put the y-intercept after our x. Now, because it's a 0, 0 is a little bit special case. We could have a plus 0 there. That would be a fine, correct answer. But we could also have just y equals negative 1/3 x with nothing after it. Because remember from the previous days, if there's nothing after that x, that's really nothing in math is 0. So that's really a plus 0 there. Either of these two answers would be perfectly fine. Let's take a look at the next one. So the first thing that I want to do is find my y-intercept, where the line crosses the y-axis. Line crosses the y-axis right here at 0, negative 3. Remember, when you type your y-intercept, you do have to have a parentheses, the 0, and the comma. How do you get from left to right, just like we read a sentence? So how many up and then how many over? So we're going up 2 over 1. Up 2 over 1. So since we're going up 2 over 1, we would have 2 over 1 as our slope. That's the number that goes in front of your x. Your y-intercept goes after it. Now this one has a y-intercept of negative 3. Therefore, we're going to write minus 3. Now, that would be a fine answer. Also, a more simplified version of this, 2 over 1. 2 divided by 1 is just 2. So technically, I could also just put this as an answer, y equals 2x minus 3. Either of those answers, perfectly fine. Take a look at this one, please. In this one, again, first thing that I want to do is I want to find my y-intercept. Where does the line cross the y-axis? Now, this starts counting up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's not labeled here, but this is a 6 on the edge of the graph because it comes after 5. So this point right here is 0, 6. How do you get from point to point to point? In our fraction, we have to do the top numbers, how many go up or down, the bottom numbers over to the right. So how do we get from here to here? How many do we have to go down? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 going down over 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 going down over 1. Down 5 is going to be a negative 5 over 1. So that's the number that goes in front of our x in our equation. And then we have a positive 6. So we're going to write plus 6. Now, again, just like the last problem, that would be a fine answer. Or we could just put y equals negative 5x plus 6. Either of those two answers, perfectly fine. All right, I want you to try these two on your own, please. All right, try these two on your own. Think of what the equations would be once you find the slope and the y-intercept. Try these two, please. I'm going to give you about 1 minute. So our y-intercept is what you should find first. Your y-intercept where the line crosses the y-axis. This one is 0, comma, -1. Our slope is always written as a fraction. How do you go from left to right? We're going down 1 over 2, down 1 over 2. So down 1 over 2 is -1/2. That's the number that goes in front of your x. Your y-intercept, your -1, or in this case, -1, goes after it. Take a look at the next one. In the next one, again, the first thing that I would do is find my y-intercept, where the line crosses the y-axis is right here at 0, comma, +1 this time. How do you go from left to right, just like we read a sentence? Now, this one's trying to trick you a little bit. Don't ever go backwards. Don't ever go to the left. We always want to go from left to right, just like we read a sentence. So how do you get from this blue dot to this blue dot? We're going up 3 over 1. So up 3 over 1. So 3 over 1 goes in front of your x. The +1 goes here because that's a +1. That would be a correct answer. Or you could also just write 3x plus 1. I want you to try two more. All right, try these two, please. I'm going to give you about 1 minute. Try these two, please. So for this first one, the first thing that I want to do is find my y-intercept where the line crosses the y-axis. It crosses it right here at 0, comma 2. How do I go from left to right, just like I read a sentence? So I'm going up 1 over 4. Up 1 over 4 would be 1/4. That's the number that goes in front of your x in your equation, and then our +2 after it because it's a +2. In this one, where does the line cross the y-axis? It crosses it right there in the middle at 0, 0. How do I go from left to right? Just like I read a sentence, I'm going down 1 over 1, down 1 over 1. Down is negative, so -1 over 1. Put that number in front of the x. We could put our +0 after the x. Now, this one has a bunch of different answers. We could have also said it's just -1 x plus 0. We could have also said technically when there's a 1 in front, we don't need that 1. We could have just said -x plus 0. You could also have all three of these answers with nothing after the x. All right, we could just say x, all right, because that blank after the x means a +0. So we could have had that answer, we could have had this answer, or we could have had this answer. So sometimes there's multiple ways to write the same equation. Now, that's one type of problem that you're going to have today. Here's the other type, and this is extremely important that you pay attention because these are very, very different. All right. Here's a little way to remember it. And you're going to hear your ninth grade teachers next year say the same thing. When you have horizontal lines go left and right. And when you have vertical lines like this that go straight up and down, you want to remember hazy Vixen. All right. This is a way to remember what you're doing. All right. Notice that in the horizontal one, we have a y equals, but in the vertical one, we have an x equals equation. So these are very different. All right. Anytime that you have a horizontal and a vertical line, you want to remember hazy Vixen. Hazy, the H in hazy stands for horizontal. And the Y stands for the Y equals. For Vixen, the V stands for vertical. So this is when you have a vertical line. And the X is for your X equals. So you need to remember hazy Vixen, all right? Why do you need to remember that? Well, when you have a horizontal line, it's a very unique equation. It's going to be a Y equals equation. And all you need to do is look at what your Y values are. Where does it cross the Y axis? It crosses the Y axis right here at 2. Therefore, our equation of our line is just Y equals 2. There is no X in this equation. Same thing here in this one. When you have a vertical line, you're going to have an X equals equation. Well, we want to know what our X values are. Where does it cross the X axis? It crosses it at -3. So our equation of our line is just X equals -3. Now, when you actually look at the points on that line, we have -2, 2, 0, 2, and 2, 2. All of our Y values are 2. When we look at these 3 points, we have -3, 2, -3, 0, and -3, -2. All of our X values are -3. Now, what do you put for the slopes and the Y-intercepts? So for your slope, in this one, for your Y equals equation, it's the same as normal, all right? To get from point to point to point, we're going up 0 over 2, up 0 over 2. For our Y-intercept, this happens to be the same. It is where the line crosses the Y-axis. It crosses it at 0, 2. So that one, these two aren't different. This one is the one that's different when you have a vertical line. Now, if you think back to the lesson the other day from 3-2, when you have a vertical line, remember the little guy standing on top of the cliff. The windstorm comes and he falls off the cliff and he is yelling something. He is yelling, no, as he falls off the cliff. Therefore, the slope of this vertical line is no slope. The Y-intercept. Where does this line cross the Y-axis? It doesn't, all right? So there is none. So very, very different answers that you're going to have to put here. But if you remember hazy Vixen, just look at where that line crosses the Y-axis. Look at where that line crosses the X-axis, all right? And that will help you write your equations. So let's take a look at 2 more of these. Notice that this one is a horizontal line. So again, remember hazy Vixen. The H stands for horizontal. That's why you're going to have a Y equals equation. Where does it cross the Y axis? It crosses it right here at -3. No, nothing after it. It's just Y equals -3. It's a special case when it's a horizontal line and a vertical line. The slope is still the same, up 0 over 1. And the Y-intercept is still found the same way, where the line crosses the Y-axis. It crosses it at -3. Let's take a look at one more vertical one. Again, notice that we have an X equals this time. Where does the line cross the X-axis? It crosses it right here at 1. So our equation is, for this vertical line, X equals 1. What is the slope? Well, the guy's falling off the cliff. He's yelling, no. So this is no slope. And where does the line cross the Y axis? It doesn't. So there is none.